I'm going to talk about how to hang a curtain rod holder on drywall when there's no stud behind it. Installing curtain rod brackets is a pretty specific job. I always start by trying to find a stud behind the wall using a stud finder, and I usually find one on at least one side of the window. The problem is that on the other side, the stud is either too far from the window frame or too close to it. And of course, you always want to place both brackets at a symmetrical distance from the window frame. So 9 times out of 10, one curtain bracket ends up between the studs, and I have to figure out how to mount it directly into the drywall. This is the corner where I marked the spot for my bracket, but there's no stud behind it. My previous bracket was about an inch to the left, but it fell because I used plastic wall anchors. They worked great when I used them in concrete walls, but not on drywall. These anchors just aren't designed for drywall. As you can see, they expand a little when the screw goes in, but not enough to get a good grip in the soft drywall material. You can pull them out pretty easily. That's exactly what happened in my case. After the plastic anchors failed, I also tried using a type of anchor called self-drilling drywall anchors, or spiral anchors. They're designed specifically for drywall and don't require pre-drilling. You just screw them in. But even those didn't hold well enough for the curtain bracket. Maybe a new construction when the drywall isn't too dry or brittle, those anchors work better. But my house is 10 years old, and I've noticed it's not easy to use any kind of plastic anchor. The hole in the drywall tends to crumble around the edges and ends up slightly larger than expected. That makes it hard for the anchor to grip properly. It also doesn't provide enough resistance to use the recommended screw size. Sometimes, the screw that's supposed to go all the way through the anchor gets stuck part way and ends up turning the anchor with it, widening the hole even more. That's exactly what happened with my plastic anchors. The object in the picture is a metal drywall anchor, more specifically a type called a molly bolt or hollow wall anchor. These anchors are used to securely fasten things to drywall or hollow walls. When you tighten the screw, the sleeve expands behind the wall, creating a firm grip. They're great for medium to heavy duty mounting tasks like shelving, mirrors, or brackets. Since plastic anchors were out of the question, I decided to go with metal drywall anchors. But it wasn't as easy as the manufacturer made it seem. First of all, you have to apply a fair amount of force to start tightening the screw and expand the sleeve behind the wall. It takes quite a bit of effort to get that sleeve to start bending properly. The anchor only has two tiny sharp anti-rotation teeth located just under the top collar or flange, and unfortunately they aren't enough to keep the anchor from spinning. By the time you push the anchor into the hole, it's already loose. I had to use pliers to hold the flange and keep the anchor from rotating. Eventually, you have to let go and hope those tiny teeth grip. But in my case, they didn't. Instead, they just carved a circular groove around the hole. I could feel them tearing up the drywall rather than locking into it. I removed the anchor and noticed the small teeth had bent under the pressure from my screwdriver. I straightened them with pliers, but I wasn't sure if the anchor would still be secure enough to reuse. I also had another type of anchor in my toolbox, spring toggle bolts. These have spring-loaded metal flaps, called wings, that fold together to fit through a pre-drilled hole. Once inside the wall cavity, the wings open up, and as you tighten the screw, they press against the back of the drywall for a secure hold. Before using them, though, I took my time to measure everything carefully. I even tested the screws on a scrap piece of drywall from a previous project to make sure they were long enough to work properly. Unfortunately, they were too short. As you can see, the wings won't open because the screws don't extend far enough. Plus, toggle bolts require a larger hole and an extra washer to keep the screw head flush against this side of the wall. I didn't feel like making a trip to the store just for different sizes, so I decided to see if I could find a way to make the first metal drywall anchor work without leaving the house. As it turned out, I had two metal drywall anchors of different sizes, and they fit the bracket holes perfectly. I used the larger anchor for the lower hole and the smaller one for the top hole, since the top hole required a smaller screw to fit through the eyelet anyway. First, I found washers that fit my two anchors. Surprisingly, the same size washer fit both. Then I used a rotary tool to make small locking notches in each washer, one for each sharp tooth on the anchor. The notches weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be since they'd be hidden from view. I used the same slip joint pliers to hold the anchor in place while tightening the screw. Eventually, I felt a solid grip form behind the drywall. That part was a little tricky. You have to push in while turning so the anchor sleeve bends and flares out behind the wall. It takes a bit of pressure, but once it grabs, you can feel it lock in tight. I made sure the washers with the custom notches were in place under the bracket to catch those tiny anti-rotation teeth. Even though the notches weren't perfect, they were enough to stop the anchor from spinning in the hole. So after I prepped my anchors and made those locking notches in the washers, I moved on to actually mounting the curtain rod bracket. Once both anchors were fully expanded and locked in, I screwed the bracket into place. In the end, the bracket felt solid. No wobble, no give. And I didn't have to run to the store, which was a win in itself. Believe it or not, it took me 2 hours to hang this curtain rod holder on drywall without a stud behind it. I started at 9:40 a.m. and now it's 11:40 a.m. I didn't expect this project to take so long. After all, it's just 2 holes and 2 screws. But it is what it is.